Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Weisselgo. Welcome to this introductory presentation for the Moral Foundations course for the spring semester 2011. I'm going to walk you through a few slides here to get us started, to give us a background and some preliminary ideas that we need to discuss if we're going to understand the material that will follow throughout this semester. During this semester, we'll be talking about some of the work of some great philosophers: Plato, Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, Immanuel Kant, and John Stuart Mill, among others. But in order to get started, we have to try to figure out what is our foundation going to be for this course. What's the background that we're going to need to understand and have in mind as we go through. So let's just follow along together. If we're going to talk about moral philosophy, we have some introductory problems. First of all, is there any difference between ethics and morality? Those are two different words, and sometimes we think of them differently. For instance, we would not be surprised to see a business ethics course in our curriculum or a medical ethics course, but it would be strange to hear business morality or medical morality. So do those two terms really have a big difference from each other? We'll have to figure that out as we go along. Ethics comes from the Greek, morality from the Latin, so we'll have to see if there is any difference as we go along. But we also have to ask, what is the aim of the study of ethics? We'll see as we begin to read Aristotle that he teaches us that the point of the study of ethics is not just to know about what's good for us, but to actually be good. And if that's the case, well, how can we accomplish that kind of an aim in an academic setting? We're used to the kinds of practices that we engage in high school and in college, where we're presented some materials, maybe some lectures, maybe some virtual lectures like this one, and then we're asked to answer some questions. Our answers are evaluated. Maybe we're asked to write papers. Our papers are evaluated. We get grades. We get credit for the course. We get a degree, and we move on. But how are we supposed to evaluate if we are good? If that's the purpose of the study of ethics, not just to know about the good, well, at least one of us, me, I have a problem. What am I to do? Follow you around the rest of your life to see if you're being moral? Would it go both ways? It's a big question. So we have to try to understand what is the aim of our academic philosophical study of morality and ethics to make sure that we're able to do what we can set out to do. And what will we need to know first in order to attain our goal? I think there's some background information that we need in order to engage in a philosophical study of ethics. So some preliminaries. What is philosophy? We're going to need to know, what exactly do we mean by the term ethics? We're going to have to know about this word epistemology. Maybe you've heard of that. We need to understand a little bit about aesthetics, a little bit about logic, and especially something about metaphysics. Right, those words may all be new to you, but we'll take them one at a time. So what is philosophy? Well, philosophy is derived from Greek terms, in fact, two Greek words: philos, meaning love, and sophia, meaning wisdom. So philosophy is a love of wisdom. Now, that's fine to know that, but the next question is, well, what exactly do we mean by love? Well, that's a big topic. We could spend an entire semester, probably an entire lifetime, truly trying to understand what love is. But love has something to do with philosophy. It's built into the word itself. We'll have to think about that a little bit as we go along. And of course, there's the other term there as well, wisdom. We may be used to thinking of a hierarchy from data to information to knowledge. In other words, we collect initial data, we organize it in a certain fashion, say that we have some information, then we process that information, and eventually we have an organized body of knowledge. Is wisdom the next step up? Is it a further organization or elaboration of knowledge, or is something else a part of that? For instance, experience or our living our own lives. Is there something additional to just a conglomeration of facts and information, even if it's organized into a body of knowledge? Well, we've got to keep that in mind. Philosophy is not like other academic courses we have. I like to say that one of the purposes of any philosophical course is to figure out that course's purpose. That's not always the case in accounting, for instance. When you take an accounting class, you know what you're there to learn. You might not know how to do accounting yet. In fact, that's why you're taking the course. But everyone understands what accounting is, at least in principle, and your job is to take that course and to figure out how you yourself can account or take care of the books for a business. Well, philosophy is always self-reflective. It's always asking, what exactly are we doing when we do philosophy? So that raises a big question. How do we teach and how do we learn that? How do we really learn philosophy? We can learn about philosophy just like we can learn about the good, but that's not really the purpose. Our purpose is to be good and maybe even to be wise, or at least lovers of wisdom. Okay, so here's some pointers to keep in mind when you start to study philosophy, because as I said, philosophy is not exactly like the other disciplines that you encounter when you're involved in your formal studies in school. So let's try to think about it a little bit. What's studying or pursuing philosophy like? Well, on the one hand, starting philosophy anyway is like starting to paint a picture. You don't If you're painting a picture, you don't start on the left-hand side of the canvas and paint it to completion and then gradually work your way across the canvas to the right-hand side. And when you get to the right edge, you're finished. That's the way a printer prints out a picture, but that's not the way a painter paints a picture. Instead, painter begins and maybe paints a base coat and maybe some other color fields here and there, and gradually keeps working over the same territory on the canvas until eventually, when the details come out and the nuances and so forth, at a certain point the picture emerges and the artist can say, I think this is it, I think this is finished. Well, philosophy is like that too. It's not a linear process all the time. So if you're a linear thinker, you may be a little disconcerted when you study philosophy, when you see you have to keep coming back around to the same territory, but you could get used to that. Philosophy will keep coming back to the same area, bringing out highlights and nuances as it goes along. Also, philosophy is something like starting a rocket ship. You ever watch those rocket launches down there in Florida, and NASA sends up a rocket, they 3, 2, 1, liftoff, and there's fire and flame and everything shakes and things are falling off, and the rocket looks like it's hardly moving at first, and you wonder, is it going to get off the ground? Is some bad thing going to happen to it? But eventually, after all that shaking and that slow start, eventually it starts moving, and the higher it gets out of the friction of the atmosphere, and finally when it's in orbit, it's just smooth sailing. In philosophy, we hope will end up like that, but we know for sure that it starts like a rocket ship. A lot of times when your ideas are made to shake and shiver, and you're not sure where it's going to go or if everything is going to make sense in the end, well, if you know that that's the way it is when you get started, you could be patient with it. And philosophy is also a little bit like climbing Mount Everest. If I were to transport you uh, today from where you're sitting to the top of Mount Everest in an instant, the blood inside you would literally boil and you would die within minutes. Die because you're not acclimated to the altitude. Well, my job is to be like your Sherpa guide for climbing Mount Everest, to make sure that you could get to the heights of philosophy, uh, but at the right pace, so that you're acclimated as you go forward. So as the course progresses, if you feel like you're getting choked off from the altitude, send me a signal. Let me know. We can slow down. We can move back down the mountain a little bit, catch our breath, and then gradually proceed up again. All right. So if you keep these things in mind when you're studying philosophy, even though it's a new kind of a field for a lot of us, it will help you as you progress to see that it's different from the other academic fields that you can be involved with. Okay, so what is ethics? Well, again, Greek word. The Greek roots for this word signify character or a trait, the idea of being oneself in the way one should be, and it's related to the word ethnos, another Greek word where we get ethnic from, or ethnology. It's referring to living together with one's own kind. Even traced back to a musical term for being in tune, or attunement, like the guitar strings have to be in tune so you get a nice sound out of them. Well, referring to our earlier question of the difference between ethics and morality, you could begin to see, well, it makes sense to talk about business ethics or medical ethics, because you're saying, in my role, what are the right traits for me as say a physician or a nurse or someone in the healing profession? How should we, who are all involved in this pursuit of making people well and healthy, how should we act? How should we choose? How should we conduct ourselves in the course of our goal-seeking project of making people healthy again? How are we going to do that together as members of this group, of being of one kind, the healing profession? So there's a difference right there in the Greek word that ethics refers to a community of being in tune with your surroundings. So being the best you can be with respect to where you are and what your place is and what our place is, what our projects are and what our goals are. So, in its roots, ethics is not fundamentally, first of all, about rules or laws or do's and don'ts. A lot of people, when they think about ethics and morality, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Don't do this, you must do that. I think we're going to find as we go along that uh, not all ethical theory, not all moral theory thinks about our lives together in terms of rules or laws. Some do, and we're going to talk about that, but not all do, and certainly not in its roots. I think we'll come to find that the elaboration or articulation of laws or rules or principles come about as a result of our learning how to get in tune with the way that we're meant to be. Fundamentally, ethics is about the good. It's about being the best that you can be. How is it best for us to be? That's the question of ethics. And that raises a quick question, an important question. Well, who's to say what that good is? Where does that notion or that understanding of the good come from? Does it come from God? Does it come from nature? Does it come from other people, our elders, our forebears, our culture? Does it come from inside of us somehow, a certain way? Well, we're going to have to figure out where this idea of the good that's supposed to orient our actions and our choices, where does that come from? Okay, what is epistemology? Again, from the Greek word episteme, which means knowledge or science, and the Greek word logos. Everybody learns in school that ology, the suffix ology, means the study of. But literally, the Greek word logos is the word for word. So in some ways, epistemology is the study of knowledge, a studying of how do we know things, and the development of our science, which we say is the stuff that we actually know. That's our sciences. Everything else is distinguished by being mere opinion. It's like saying, what's the word about knowledge? I just want to point out a historical connection here. Here's the beginning of the Gospel of John in Greek, en arche en o logos, kai o logos en pros ton theon, ke theos en o logos. Okay, my Greek pronunciation is not too good, but here it is in English. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Okay, so logos, that Greek word, means word, something I don't think we pay enough attention to when we think of it as the study of. In effect, epistemology is the study about the true. It's a concern with the true. Just like ethics is a concern with the good, epistemology is a concern with the true. And so when in Christian thought Christ says, I am the truth, well, I am the Word, I am the truth, I am the Logos. And if that's the epitome of the concern of theology, well, epistemology is a study of the true in general, in all areas of life. What is aesthetics? Well, again, from the Greek word aesthesis, meaning sensitivity or sentience. So if you've ever been anesthetized when you're having surgery or an operation, that's to make sure that you don't sense anything, that you don't feel anything. But the concern of aesthetics is about the beautiful. Just like epistemology's concern is the true and ethics' concern is the good, aesthetics' concern is the beautiful. I once asked in a class, what is the name of the field that studies the beautiful, hoping for the answer aesthetics, and I got the answer cosmetology. And I thought that was a pretty interesting answer, and I thought about that because I heard the Greek word cosmos in that. And I thought, what's the relationship between cosmetology, like beauty school, and the cosmos, the whole universe, all that there is? And I had to go back and look that up. That Greek word cosmos signifies order. So the cosmos, everything there is thought to have a certain order to it. And when you go to a cosmetologist, what are you doing? You're going there to get your look in order, to get your face in order. In other words, to get beautiful. So there's a relationship between the beautiful and order, which we'll have to keep in mind. Okay, so what is philosophy? Philosophy likes to ask two fundamental kinds of questions. Why? Why is something the way it is? And sometimes it asks it insistently, almost like A 2-year-old will keep asking why, to the point of distraction. Well, that's the reason why sometimes philosophers are a little distracting and irritating to other folks sometimes. And philosophers like to ask, what is it really? Now you got to put the emphasis on that word really, because everybody asks what that is. Well, what is that? Well, that's a dog. Yeah, but what is a dog really? I mean, what's the essence of it? What's its nature? What's its biological and anatomical and chemical and physical makeup? That's what philosophers like to do. They like to get behind the appearance of something. What is that? It's a dog, and get into what is it essentially? What's it really all about? And they like to ask these questions about the good, the true, and the beautiful. And when they're asking about the good, why and what is it really, they're doing ethics. And when they ask about the true, why and what is it really, they're doing epistemology. And when they ask why and what is it really about the beautiful, they're doing aesthetics. And you should know that these three, according to a lot of philosophers, are convertible. What that means is the good is true and beautiful. The true is good and beautiful. The beautiful is good and true. So these are all related. And we'll have to ask ourselves, what does that mean for the study of ethics? I think it means that we're going to have to keep in mind when we're doing ethics, we also have to do epistemology, and we also have to do aesthetics, and probably some other things as well. Like metaphysics. What is that? Well, it's from two Greek words, a prefix, meta, meaning after or beyond, and the Greek word physics, which means nature. And you'll see I put a little question mark there in the presentation, because what exactly is nature? But originally it means to bring forth or to make grown, to make to have grown, or to vegetate. Physis, nature. Okay, so it sounds like it means metaphysics, something beyond the natural. Okay? Now, Aristotle's book, The Metaphysics, from where we get the word, does not use that word in it. It refers to its subject matter as first philosophy or theology. It doesn't use the word metaphysics. Now, what is that first philosophy or theology? Well, if his book, Aristotle's book on the physics, is to try to explain things in terms of their causes, then the metaphysics is about the first uncaused causer, right? The theos, maybe God, or the first unmoved mover, or the first uncaused causer. And if physics explains things in terms of prior causes, how can you explain things like God, which doesn't have a prior cause? You see, God doesn't lend itself to scientific or physical explanation because it's a different kind of a thing that you're interested in. So that's what Aristotle was trying to think about in his book, The Metaphysics, in a very complex and subtle and nuanced way. And so later on, when scholars were trying to catalog Aristotle's works, and he wrote a lot of them, they need to try to figure out, where to catalog this book on first uncaused causer, the principles behind everything, before the causes that give rise to the causes. Where does that fit into his whole philosophical set of works? Aristotle wrote books on logic, on animals, on the weather, on rhetoric, on physics, and among these books there was this one on first philosophy. So the librarian cataloged it in the set order right after the physics book, Metaphysica. That's where you wanted to find this book on first philosophy. You go to the physics books, and then the next one over, that's this book. That's what you're looking for. So really, it wasn't a term of art at the beginning. It was just a description of where to find this book in Aristotle's collection of works. But the term stuck to refer to that philosophical pursuit that tries to get involved with the first principles. So the classic definition of metaphysics is the study of being qua being. That is, the study of being or existence or even reality just insofar as it is being and not this or that particular type of being. So for instance, let's just take a house cat. We can study it as a feline, call it felinology, in common with other cats, panthers and lions and tigers. Or we could study that house cat as an animal in zoology, in common with dogs and rattlesnakes and birds and other animals. Or we could study it as a living thing altogether, in common not just with the animals, but with plants and other living things. We could study that cat in terms of its particular chemical composition in chemistry, where we could study rocks, for instance, as well. Or we could study that house cat as a physical object in physics in common with all other material things. But what is the field that studies anything at all, just insofar as it a thing, material or otherwise, at all? Well, the name of that field is metaphysics. Now, there's been some objections to metaphysics. It hasn't always been popular in philosophy. It's on the comeback now, as a matter of fact. But for a while in the last century, metaphysics was in disrepute. Well, why was that? What are some possible objections to it? Well, it's alleged to be about things beyond, there's that word meta, beyond the physical world, metaphysica. That word metaphysics, like I said, came from the librarian. It came after the physics book, but people started to think of it as it's the study of things beyond the physical things. And a lot of people didn't think and still don't think there are any such things. So if there aren't any, then there's nothing for metaphysics to study, and therefore no reason to do it. Some think it's too general or too abstract as to be meaningless. There's a famous point that existence is not a predicate. Right? What does that mean? Well, take that house cat of mine. He's brown. Brownness is a predicate. The cat is brown. The cat has whiskers. The cat is hairy. The cat is tall. Those are all characteristics or predicates that are true about my cat. But how can existence be a predicate? The cat that is the cat that is brown. The cat that is tall. The cat that is the thing with whiskers. But isness, being, existence, is not one of those things that predicate. Something has to exist in order for predicates to be true about it in the first place. So existence is kind of a weird thing. It's too general or too abstract, and how in the world would you study it? And some think that it has no relation to evidence at all, that it's really just speculative, that metaphysicians are those people that just sit in a room and make stuff up, basically. And I can see why people think this. If you went down to your local Borders or Barnes & Noble and looked in the metaphysics section of the store, you really wouldn't find philosophy books. You'd find things about ghosts and crystals and past life regressions and all kinds of stuff like that, that people, a lot of other people, don't think there's any evidence for at all. So if that's what metaphysics is all about, those things, well, then, maybe we shouldn't bother with it. But I don't think that's the best way to think about it. I think you should think about metaphysics this way. It's about the general nature of reality, either in general, reality in general, or about the basic reality of some particular type of things. And the type of thing we're interested in right now is human beings. It's descriptive rather than speculative. It's looking for the basic patterns, the basic conceptual and not physical structure of things. And I'll say more as we go along what I mean by the difference between a conceptual and physical structure of things. It's about the meaning of things, right? So physical science can give you the physical structure of things, but physical science can't talk to you about the meaning of things. And metaphysics is involved when we have that question. It's about what it takes for something to have been the kind of thing that it is. Right? What does it take to be a human being? That's the why and what does it really question combined. What does it take for something to have been a human being? And it must take into account other levels of understanding. So it must take into account evidence provided by the sciences, the natural and the social and human sciences. Okay, so here's a controversial claim, first of many this semester, I suspect. It is impossible to understand ethics without understanding metaphysics, and that's because it's impossible ultimately to understand anything without understanding metaphysics. Now, that's controversial because there are a lot of people, a lot of philosophers who would not agree with this, who think we can get along just fine without doing metaphysics. In fact, doesn't science go about its business all day long without getting into metaphysics? And my answer is, of course, that it does. And we learn a lot from the pursuit of the natural and social sciences. But in order to really understand, to fully understand something, you have to take the next step. I think my argument is into to a metaphysical appropriation of what the sciences have been teaching us in order to really understand what all of that means. Now, it's controversial. Not everyone agrees. You might not agree, but you ought to know up front that's the way I'm planning to pursue this question of the study of ethics. Okay, so there's another piece that we have to make mention of. What is logic? Well, it comes from that Greek word logos again, word, but it refers really here not so much about the facts of the world as it is about the relationship between the facts of the world. Okay? And it's important for us to understand and be logical when we're exploring and when we're discussing with each other how it is best for us human beings to be. In other words, when we study ethics and moral philosophy. Um, and so I'm going to refer you to another presentation in the course that will take us down through a little basics in logic and argumentation, just to help us understand what we read a little better and help us present our own ideas a little bit more clearly. So basically, logic is about good reasoning, and we need to just draw our attention to that a little bit before we get started. Okay, so in conclusion, we will take a philosophical approach to the study of ethics. We will pay attention to our metaphysical presuppositions about the nature of reality in general and about human persons in particular. That's important. Even if we don't think we're metaphysicians, all of us carry metaphysical views. Even the most anti-metaphysical philosophers still operate under a basic conceptual framework about the way things are. And that's metaphysics. You can't really escape it. So it's much more important to recognize that fact, acknowledge it, and make our presuppositions clear to ourselves and change them if we think we should.